Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Monday, July 6, 2026, first day of Douglas County budget hearings for the 2027 budget. Today, a quick overview of today is we're going to get a budget overview first from staff, and then we'll move into supportive housing requests and partners that are here. At 9:30 is what we're scheduled for, and at 10:30 we're scheduled to move on to behavioral health and substance use projects. And with that, I think I'm probably kicking it over to Sarah first.
Thank you, commissioners. We're excited to present the 2027 proposed budget. This is months of work on the part of staff to put together $200 million budget. So I want to really thank the team here that has worked most closely with this: Brooke Sauer, Jake Broadbent, Andrea Chavez. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brooke to give you the overview. As always, commissioners, just jump in when you have questions, and we'll try to keep an eye on the time. Brooke?
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, commissioners. During the overview, we're going to talk about revenues that will support this 2027 recommended budget in the next few slides, and then we'll walk through fund balances, fund types, uses. Then we'll follow up with some of the departmental and community partner requests for the upcoming budget cycle. So jumping right in, on the screen, we're looking at the 2026 estimated assessed value for your 2027 budget. The annual operating budget is prepared months in advance using data collected between March and May of each calendar year. During this period, staff collects budget data related to expenditures for personnel, contractual services, commodities, and capital. We're also working with our community partners to gather their upcoming needs for the future budget year. In June, the county clerk, in coordination with the appraiser's office, will certify the values for the categories listed on this screen. In Douglas County, real estate makes up 91% of property assessment sources. State assessed property follows at 8%, and personal property makes up about 1% of those properties assessed. Real estate is the total value for all real estate property in the county, and that's the top number listed on this slide. As staff reported last year, the largest increase over the prior year assessed value for real estate was observed in 2022. That year, we saw a 14% increase over the 2021 real estate values certified for that prior year. The tax increment finance values are then subtracted from that real estate value for each TIF district by design as part of the tax increment financing tool. In addition to the tax increment finance values, the City of Baldwin implemented an RHID district. The first year that district shows on the tax roll was in 2025, so you did not see this line in your slide last year. The increment value above the base value for all properties in that RHID district totals $1.5 million. The percentage increase over the prior year is very high comparatively to last year's increment value of just a hair over $560,000. We then capture personal property in that total, so this includes things like vehicles, boats, trailers, and business equipment. The last value that makes up the county's total value used for this budget is the state assessed value, and that's often referred to as public utility. State assessed properties are valued directly by the state of Kansas rather than by local county appraisers, so we get that number directly from the state. This typically includes properties owned by utilities, railroads, and pipeline companies that operate across multiple counties. Once these values are combined, we have the total assessed value for the county. For budget purposes, a delinquency rate is then considered. In the past, we've traditionally used a 2.5% delinquency rate to prepare the budget. The 2026 recommended budget includes a 2% delinquency rate, and the calculated rate for the 2025 ad valorem collections was at 1%. And finally, the 2026 rate of delinquent collections will be available after the final distribution later this year. The total assessed value along with the delinquency rate are then used to develop our annual operating budget. Diving a little bit deeper into property classes, for 2026, the county's value increased by 4.9% over the prior year's final assessed value from November. This increase is affected by multiple types of real estate property classes that are listed on our tax roll. Property classes are defined by state constitution, and they determine how different types of real estate property is assessed for tax purposes. This classification is based on the property's use, and each class has a specific assessment percentage applied to its appraised value. Each property under the real estate class designation is represented in the pie chart. You can see that most of the appraised value in the county comes from residential properties. The remaining class percentages, followed by commercial, and then the remaining class percentages are 1% or below. Residential properties are assessed at 11.5% of market value. Commercial and ag classifications are assessed at a rate of 25% of market value. Vacant lots, nonprofit, and other classifications are assessed at a rate of 12%. In the last decade, the county's mill levy has undergone a significant shift, moving from a period of gradual increase to a sustained and meaningful reduction. Beginning in 2022, the mill levy moved into a steady downward trend. This represents a reduction of 6.75 mills from the 2021 peak, which is an observed overall decrease of about 14.2% over the course of 4 years. The 2027 mill levy was prepared flat. County sales tax is collected at a total rate of 1.25%. This rate in Douglas County, or for Douglas County, includes two different taxes: a 1% general tax that has been in place since 1995 and a dedicated 0.25% sales tax approved in 2019 to fund the construction and operational expenses for the Treatment Recovery Center. The table on the top focuses on that 1% general sales tax collected in the general fund. For the 2026 reestimate, staff has included an increase of 6.8% in sales tax collection over the adopted budget, and a slight decrease of 0.04% when compared to the 2026 reestimate for the 2027 recommended budget. As a reminder, the 1% sales tax is shared based on a ratio that is determined and calculated by the state of Kansas. Based on those current ratios, Lawrence receives about 58 cents of every dollar collected in sales tax. That 1% sales tax, I should be specific. The county receives about 36 cents. Eudora receives about 4 cents. Baldwin City, 3, and Lecompton receives just a fraction of a penny. As staff reported in May, from 2017 to 2027, collections increased from roughly 7.2 million annually to around 10.1 million annually, which is a 41% increase. But with a clear pattern, we've got modest growth, a pandemic dip, a sharp rebound, and then a pattern of stabilization in the most recent years. Staff applied the same forecasting logic used for the 1% general sales tax for the 2026 reestimate and used a 1% increase in revenue over the 2025 actuals for the 2027 recommended budget. The dedicated sales tax collections in the Mental Health Sales Tax Fund have outpaced the 1% general sales tax collection year over year for the past 5 years. Unlike the 1% general sales tax dollars, the tax collected for that 1/4 cent or 0.25% sales tax, the fully dedicated sales tax, 100% of those dollars collected through that tax go to Douglas County. It is not split between the cities. Focusing in on investment income, from 2017 through 2022, our investment income was fairly modest. Collections range from just $400,000 annually to over $1 million annually during that period. Beginning in 2023, interest earnings increased significantly due to changes made to the county's demand deposit and savings accounts. We restructured them to earn interest in cash and higher earnings in our long and short-term maturities, along with the county's investment in the Kansas Municipal Investment Pool. Focusing on interest earned in long and short-term maturities, income climbed approximately $4.7 million in 2023, and by 2024, collections totaled $8.5 million annually. The decrease in interest income estimated for the 2026 proposed for the future year and for the future year budget consider lower interest rates, smaller cash balances, as large capital projects come closer to being completed. In terms of capital expenditure, staff estimates a $30 million spend down in 2026 and an additional $25 million in 2027. And that's just for facilities projects. That does not include our road and bridge infrastructure projects. It's more if you consider those improvements. And that capital plan was provided to you commissioners today. Looking at the funds that the county has and different types of funds and how they're supported, staff provided our 3 levied funds. Looking at our general fund, that fund is the largest operating fund at the county. It provides revenue sources to support county services, and it is fully funded with property and sales tax revenue. Our employee benefits fund is sourced by property tax. And then our road and bridge fund, probably the second larger operating fund as it relates to personnel expenditures, is supported with property tax and gas tax. That fund in particular supports road maintenance and road infrastructure in Douglas County. Staff has prepared a budget with a flat mill levy of 40.669 mills. The total recommended for budget for the 3 levied funds that we just talked about is $154.2 million in 2027. The revenue neutral rate for Douglas County is calculated at 38.605 mills. Commissioners, to reach revenue neutral, the county would need to cut $4.8 million from this proposed budget to reach that calculated mill rate. For consolidated fire, that would be approximately $117,000 to reach revenue neutral rate for that fund. The funds listed on this slide again are some of the county's largest operating funds with respect to personnel and fringe costs. The only other fund that incurs personnel expenses is our motor vehicle operating fund, which we'll talk about on the next slide. In addition to the levied funds on that last slide, the budgeted special purpose funds on this slide make up the remaining portion of the recommended budget before you this week, bringing that total to $201.5 million. It's important to note that these funds are not relying on property tax dollars, and I would say that with the exception of the behavioral health sales tax fund, which receives a transfer from the general fund. The Special Parks and Rec Fund expenditures can only be used to purchase, establish, maintain, or expand parks, recreational facilities, or recreational programs once it reaches those funds. The Special Alcohol Programs Fund expenditures must only be used for alcohol and drug-related programs such as prevention, treatment, enforcement, and education. The municipality's Vice Addiction Fund expenditures are limited to grants for projects and activities that prevent, reduce, treat, or mitigate substance use and addiction. The Emergency Telephone Fund, the expenditures there are limited to projects that support costs related to implementing 911 services, and that includes purchasing equipment, maintenance, training, and other emergency infrastructure needs. Coming back around to that Motor Vehicle Operations Fund, the expenditures here are limited to services that support a state-mandated service, and those are activities related to vehicle titling and registrations. The Bond and Interest and Local Sales Tax Fund are limited to servicing the county's debt. And then finally, the Behavioral Health Sales Tax Fund services debt. It pays for operating the Treatment and Recovery Center, and it also funds capital projects related to behavioral health services and facilities across Douglas County. Commissioners, staff wanted to break down fund balances assigned for the county's 3 levied funds on this slide. Actual fund balances on the slide for 2025 and 2026 have been calculated using the total expenditure budget against the percent of fund balance carried from year to year. The slide also shows what the county expects to roll over into January of 2027. And then based on current estimates, the county plans to move into the new year at 26% of planned expenditures in the general fund when compared to the 2027 budgeted expenditures, 33% for road and bridge, and 28% for the employee benefits fund. Staff then calculated a targeted fund balance percent moving forward into the 2028 budget, but that's of course based off of the 2027 expenditures. Those values target a 25% fund balance for the general fund, 25% in the road and bridge fund, and 20% in the employee benefits fund. The non-levied special use fund balances estimated for the remaining budgeted funds are listed here. Again, these are special purpose funds that are dedicated for the special purposes that staff just outlined. The Behavioral Health Sales Tax Fund includes a mix of operating expenses and capital funds. And the CIP balance listed on this slide includes both the bond sale proceeds and the transfer from the 1% sales tax fund for cash funding of the courthouse expansion and public safety building projects that are occurring right now. I'd like to turn the slides over to my colleague, Jake Broadbent, to cover the community partner funding request. Jake.
Thanks, Brooke. The county provides $15.4 million in annual ongoing support to over 40 local agencies and nonprofits. Most of this funding, about $8.9 million, goes to our behavioral health and substance use disorder partners. The remaining funding is split between our other 4 categories: at-risk and targeted populations, health and human services, heritage and land management, and economic development. So I'll go over our one supplemental request from a community partner that was funded in the budget, and Sarah will probably have more to say after. One supplemental request from the Extension Council is included for funding to give market adjustments similar to state employees' adjustments to county funded employees, and a small increase in contractual funds. This is the only supplemental request from a community partner funded in the proposed budget due to the county's statutory obligation to the Extension Council.
Thanks, commissioners. I say this to community partners when I meet with them. As a general rule, I do not include funding for community partners in my proposed budget. I believe that if commissioners want to expand that service or expand that relationship, that's a policy decision of the commission. So that's up to you all to do. You have in your book, you've got every supplemental request that those community partners wish to have move on included. So you see all them. They just aren't funded in my proposed budget. with the exception of extension. This would be, they have state employees and they have county and grant funded employees. So this would be similar to what they're getting from the state for their state employees on those other employees, and it amounts to just under $6,000 a year. So that was the only one I included for community partners.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, included in your recommended budget are some supplemental department requests that have been included in those recommended numbers. The first is a market adjustment for county staff. The average of the job families for the market-based pay is 3.4%. There's a merit pool of 1% that's been included, and then longevity pay, and that is $40 for each year of service after the employee reaches 5 years of consecutive service with Douglas County. The recommended budget also includes a couple of full-time equivalent positions, 1.0 FTE for the self-help district court navigator, and 1 FTE for the self-help eviction diversion coordinator. These positions have been funded for a number of years through grants, and those grants are going away. One of them is ARPA, and one of them is an EDI grant that was provided by the state. Additional operational support for our new building construction is 2 full-time deputies for courthouse security. And then continuing on to land management, a comprehensive zoning code update has been included with this recommended budget to continue that work. A one-time transfer to replace vans for our senior wheels van service. IT and software service, we have $700,000 included to support that critical infrastructure. And staff has included tenant eviction defense as a one-time expenditure in this recommended budget.
Just a couple of clarifying comments on here. So on the 2 positions for district court also eliminated 1.5 FTE out of the court trustee budget. So really, this leaves their FTE count at neutral. Because they reduced their FTE count, I felt like it was appropriate to go ahead and put these positions in. On the courthouse security positions, the commissioners gave the sheriff 2 positions last year this current year, 2026. So this would be a total of 4 new positions for security in the expanded courthouse. Do want to clarify that the IT software on this line is not one time. We anticipate that will be ongoing.
Thank you for the clarification, Sarah. So commissioners, over the next few days, you're going to hear from community partners and internal departments about their budget requests. After the hearings wrap up later this week, the deliberation process will begin. Deliberations will run through the morning of July 15th, and after those deliberations wrap up, we will calculate the mill levy based on the deliberation discussions, and we'll come to the board the evening of the 15th and ask for the establishment of a maximum levy rate for the 2027 budget during the regular business meeting that evening at 5:30. Following the revenue neutral rate being established, county staff will provide a presentation on the CIP. That will be on July 22nd. By August 10th, the county will send a letter to all taxpayers in Douglas County, and we will publish the hearing dates in the newspaper, notifying the county's intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate, and the hearing dates that have been established for both R&R hearing and the budget hearing, and that is required by law. By August 26th, staff will present the commission with the adopted budget, and at that time, we will adopt our 2027 budget. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah to kick off
See if commissioners have any questions. We've got a couple minutes before we need to start hearings.
I had one question. That was about the two sales taxes, and proposed one of those is shown in at a small increase and one at a small decrease. Why are they different?
Go ahead.
The sales tax decrease for next year was a small adjustment. Staff included a small inflationary adjustment this year for World Cup events to account for some additional sales tax revenue. And the reason why we calculated the sales tax differently for the dedicated quarter cent or 0.25% sales tax is the sales tax collections for that particular tax are far outpacing the sales tax collections for the 1%. When looking at the state's numbers, staff pulled and evaluated those numbers, and it's coming in higher. So that's why we took a little bit different of approach for that quarter cent dedicated sales tax and calculated that at 1% as opposed to the slight decrease for the general sales tax, which is shared amongst the cities in Douglas County.
Yeah, it's weird. You know, you would think it'd be the exact same, but it is because of what's included, what we get to keep of the 1%. It doesn't track exactly. And commissioners, in your budget book, you have summary data back several years for both sales taxes, if you want to take a look at that. Other questions?
I don't have any questions. I was just about to check in with fellow commissioners and see if we have any questions about the basic overview so far, or if we're ready to move, or maybe Sarah, I'm seeing a note from Sarah that maybe we want to wait until 9:30 start time.
Oh, I think it'll probably take about 4 minutes to get everybody up here. I was going to say, so at the end of our deliberations, the last group of departments you're going to hear from are core services, so administration, IT, maintenance. And I'm going to have Brooke be prepared at that point in time to do a little more detail on the employee benefits fund. So you can see kind of some of the changes that we had to make there. In addition to moving some mill levy from the general fund to the employee benefits fund, we also moved some one-time cash dollars that were left in the general fund at the end of 2025. So I want to show you all that information. If you have other questions about revenues, just let us know, and then we can be prepared to talk about revenues as we wrap up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sarah. Well, with that, I'll let you go ahead and invite our partners up that we have for this portion of time.
Yep, commissioners, our first set of hearings are on supportive housing. So invite Jill to come forward. She's going to give you the overview, and our supportive housing partners to come on up.
Yeah.
Next contestant.
Want one of you come sit up here just for fun. Is there one more seat open down there? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hey, Dustin, why don't you come have a seat at the table just in case? Yeah. Oh, we got never mind. Another room. Sorry. Yeah, all good. You're here. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Jill Jolliker, Assistant County Administrator. Before we get going, I might ask all my colleagues around the table to introduce themselves. I'll pass it on to Rebecca.
Rebecca Buford, Executive Director of Tenants to Homeowners.
Hannah Bolton, Program Director of Cardinal Housing Network.
Brenda Wall, Executive Director of Family Promise of Lawrence.
Galal Ubaid, VP of Program Operations at the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority.
Simon Besmer, Vice President, Mental Health America of the Heartland.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, one for each. It's okay. I have some handouts just to frame up, and there's some extra handouts in the back. I forgot to make copies for everybody at this end of the table. I apologize. Nothing should surprise any of y'all, but I wanted to at least frame up for everyone, give you a sense of just at a big picture from a supportive housing perspective, one of the handouts you have, and again, there's some extra copies at the back of the room that frame out when we think about the larger supportive housing budget, who are the partners that are in here, framed out for you all. What was the funding in the previous year's budget? What is the funding in this year's budget? And what does this year's budget request look like? Including I did break it out by one-time capital, one-time funding, which could be for capital projects or that mental health municipalities fights addiction fund one-time purposes, and what is ongoing operating funding that's built into those budgets. So broke those out for you all, and then also just framed out who are the primary populations that these organizations serve. I think it's important to note that, I listed, when it comes to organizations like Tenants to Homeowners, they provide supportive housing to a broad spectrum of vulnerable community members, but I listed kind of the top ones that we have them targeted to serve in our Place for Everyone plan. But a lot of these folks, they're pretty all-encompassing. So that's one way to look at what's in front of you all today. And then another thing that I wanted to make sure I shared with you all is just in terms of, how does this all line up with the goals that we established in the A Place for Everyone supportive housing focus area. You can see that the units that were identified as needed in A Place for Everyone, the new units that have been funded, and then what is remaining to meet that goal. And you can see on here that there are some significant areas where we have not made progress, and that's in particular, that is homeless young adults age 17 to 23. And that's not, we know that population may be included in some of these other priority populations. But as of yet, we have not had a focused project specifically focused on that serving that population. That being said, I mentioned this a couple moments ago. That is a population that Tenants to Homeowners I know does serve transition age youth and other organizations. But in terms of new projects and new expanded services, supportive housing for that population group, you can see we have not made as much progress as we like to make there. So then the last thing I wanted to highlight for you all is you have all of our partners around the table or in the room. You had 2 supplemental funding requests from Family Promise for some one-time funding to support paying off some of the capital projects that they have done for the community that are in service of the goals that we established in A Place for Everyone. And then you have a request from Cardinal Housing Network, which is consistent with the request that they received for municipalities fights addiction funding that was awarded earlier this year on a one-time basis because those are one-time dollars. They've requested ongoing sustaining dollars in their budget. And then you have all the other partners around the table that are slated to continue to receive the funding that was included in the past year's budget. And with that, I will stand for questions, and you have all of our partners here that are available for questions as well.
Jill, thank you all for being here this morning. Commissioners, anybody got a question teed up? I'll give the first one. Hannah, I'm curious on the one-time request that we have for the 2 different sort of safety projects or safety needs at 2 different properties. It mentions what sounds like a newer property that is part of Cardinal Housing Network in Baldwin. Can you give us a little bit more information about that since we haven't heard about it as a commission?
Yes, this property was purchased kind of in the same breadth of how 1046 New Hampshire was purchased. My dad and I had purchased it through an LLC. The house had sat on the market for a good chunk of time, but it is a 5-bedroom, 2-bath home and has 3 accessory dwelling units unfinished at this point. it sits on a corner lot. There is a tremendous amount of parking. It's 2 blocks from downtown. And, as we were trying to figure out how this is going to play out and how the project is going to, or who the project is going to serve, one of the things that was addressed in a lot of the data was that there is a significant amount of homelessness for single moms in Baldwin. And so the hope is that we can find a structure within the next 6 to 8 months that accommodates potentially 2 single moms and kids in the shared co-op living arrangement. And really what I wanted to focus on today was talking a little bit more about the importance of having those in-house live-in managers. When I'll just candidly admit I was in Greek life here at KU, and one of the things that I really want to see these positions transition into is, while it is also the kind of this mom supervision kind of care coordination role that is there day to day, I also think that these positions could really be a good alleviation for property management. Kind of having that skill set and a huge participant of our transportation program, especially if we are transporting folks from Baldwin to Lawrence to receive services, particularly IOP. There's some really exciting projects that we have kind of are on the cusp of diving into where we could potentially get some services delivered to Baldwin or have a set amount of time in Lawrence where we can bring folks up from Baldwin to receive those services, whether physical, mental health, and everybody can kind of do that at their own or in that block period where it helps us logistically. But I really see that these kind of live-in directors, particularly in Baldwin, I would love to find somebody who is established in the recovery community in Baldwin that can lead that effort. One of the things that we'll have to play out is what does it look like to fund that? If it's a shared co-op space, a lot of times they're not eligible for some of the voucher opportunities. And so making sure that that's financially feasible. I think I've been overly candid about our family's kind of participation in this. And I just want to reiterate, there is truly no money really to be made in supportive housing. And so there is no real financial benefit. We will attempt to keep the rent as low as possible to make sure that that works. But we're going to have to probably get a little creative on how we are going to be funding that on a month-to-month basis for utilities. But the project has a ton of potential, and I'm really excited it's also not a major renovation project. So I'll just mention that. It's
Nice.
pretty well
Look at
done.
that. Gradual
It needs paint,
progress
but-
as you accumulate. Okay, well, thank you. That's helpful. And I think you maybe answered what my follow-up question was, which is the other supplemental request. We have the one-time supplemental request that's fairly nominal for 2 different properties. And then the more significant one for on-time operations. And I wanted to be sure that that is inclusive of operations starting in Baldwin in addition to the properties that are open and operating in Lawrence.
That's
Correct?
the intention.
Okay.
I do think that we are probably on a little bit more of a delayed timeline on the construction over at 1126 Ohio. That is going to be a very, very large construction project, so that might be a bit of a delay, but I do think Baldwin could get up and running pretty quickly. Realistically, the only things that we really need to do are freshen up the space and create there's some issues with foundation drainage, but it's pretty minimal and we plan to cover that through the LLC. The only other thing worth noting is that I had a really wonderful opportunity come to Cardinal where the Panhellenic Association for KU has adopted us as their partner for the next 2 years. And so we get essentially 1,300 volunteers to really step in once this fall semester. Also, every fine that these women accrue through violations to their chapter also will come to us. So I think that that's how we're planning to subsidize a lot of the food. As you'll note, I didn't include everything in this budget. I really include the staffing support that we really need, and then those utilities, which is about $1,000 a month per property. So, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Commissioners, other questions for Hannah about the Cardinal request since I started there?
Thank you.
So as you begin to enter new communities, how are you partnering with Baldwin Leadership?
Well, I will say, Commissioner Anderson was so great, or I'm so gracious that you introduced me to some folks there. I have some follow-ups to do to kind of get a better feel of how we're going to operate down there. There are some folks that have really strong connections with the county, like Dave Hill. My contractor that has been working at the Ohio properties is a Baldwin resident. The sheriff is also there. So I'm really hoping to have some really candid conversations. We're also in an area where there is sorority and fraternity houses from Baker University close by. So group home living isn't that obscure, I don't believe. But I also would love to tap into Commissioner Willie's expertise with you're doing some housing boards and things like that. But recovery community wise, have a lot of work to do in the next 6 months. And I think that once we have a really clear idea of where we're going with the budget and what we're able to fund, then we'll be able to have more comprehensive conversations. The reality is if we don't receive funding to be able to do all of this work, that will likely become an Oxford home where we're not in any way, shape, or form really involved other than the landlord capacity. And that's the only way that that's financially and monetarily, or, for us to be able to manage a program, we would require some staff to be present. So we're kind of at the cusp where we're deciding whether, we go all into the work that we've done with Amethyst Place and the work that we've done with all of our community partners, or if we're not able to receive funding, scaling back and figuring out how to just be effective property managers.
Follow up? Oh,
Your call.
sorry. So the housing, the house in Baldwin, it was acquired through the LLC and not yet through the nonprofit? Okay. and
Correct.
That's why there's no debt payment in
Correct.
your budget?
Yep.
For contributions, you have contributions that have kind of shown up over the years, but nothing slated for the 2027 budget. How is your fundraising out in the community? I know your family contributed a great deal, and that may be what we're seeing in the past, but how are those conversations going?
Year to date, we're at about 45,000 in contributions. We, again, don't really have the capacity to plan a lot of these major events and these volunteer activities that require pretty substantial staffing. I think as we transition into this next phase, that there will be more input on community gathering and fundraising in that regard. But a lot of the things that I had noted in the work session that we had was there aren't a lot of opportunities for grants to support salary that aren't federal or pretty intensive state continuum of care type grants. A lot of those require 3 years of audited financials, and we only have 2 years of financials in general. And so there's a big gap there in what we're able to acquire. Again, every small grant that I can apply for, we really try to do that. And most of that is focusing on the food, the utilities, and the stabilization. And that, I believe, is a pretty fruitful category. Like there's quite a bit of money to be had for the actual supportive services. And that's why that wasn't included in this budget.
I was just looking in terms of like private contributions and those conversations in the community, because the work you're doing is important, and just making sure that private individuals also get the opportunity to support that.
Absolutely.
Do you have because there's nothing in there listed for it for 2027 in your budget. So just, are those efforts ongoing?
Absolutely. So within the last year, I've probably spoken to 14 different agencies, including the Rotary Clubs. There's quite a few women's led organizations, the Douglas County Connect. I've kind of been on a pretty strict speaking engagement, but one of those things too is that it also requires a significant amount of follow-up to be able to leverage those expertise and things. And so I'm really hoping that with a little bit of relief for the staffing and the day-to-day and the property management, that I can really get into fundraising, where I do have a background in that, in major gift fundraising. And so I would love to be able to do that a little bit more and have more of a focus for our organization moving forward.
Another revenue question. You mentioned in your narrative about some program fees and that those program fees, would have to change if we don't get more other support. But I don't see the program fees listed as in your revenue. Do you?
Yeah, it turns out this budget was very poorly done. So one of the things that we had noted too, so right now we're receiving $2,000 again from the sheriff's office to supplement 4 beds at our entry-level home. That gives them about 30 days. So we just received the mortgage release for 1046 on June 15th. So that hasn't been in the mix very long, but Cardinal did not make a payment to Solidago for June. And so that has freed up that money for utilities, which are very high in the month of June and July. But those are kind of things where now we're able to utilize those services or those freed up dollars to support our overall operations. And that's really helping with utilities and other contributions. We're really looking to move again to that fully subsidized model where the women aren't required to pay rent in the same capacity as Artists Helping the Homeless. We are seeing pretty dramatic circumstances where folks are, I've probably had conversations with over half that when their rent is due, there is extreme anxiety. And so there will be a significant deduction, if not a full deduction, of what the residents are contributing to their funds. And so I think that you'll see a lot of transformation in where these women can go if they're, put on this savings plan where it's an 80-20, save 80%, spend 20. And I think that will significantly change outcomes on their secondary housing. We're seeing a lot of folks go back to past relationships, moving in with friends, and we have seen some recidivism after those decisions, and those options are executed.
One more question that I'll see others are waiting. On the supplemental, on the second supplemental for the fire suppression system, does that require any kind of an ongoing contract or is it just truly a one-time set that up?
It's a one-time contract. With the fire alarm system, there is a $50 a month ongoing fee. But no, that's a one-time. And that is required given the 4 or more apartments. And I think preferably I would love to have fire suppression in all of the buildings, but they are very expensive. So.
What does the research tell us on transitioning individuals back to paying their bills once they've been not paying their bills? So if we transition to not subsidizing them, and then it's time for them to begin to pay their bills again, what does the research tell us? Many times we have anxiety when bills come due, whether it be medical bills, rent, car payment. We all, at some point during our lives, whether it is growing up in a home or transitioning out of our parents' home or transitioning out of our caregiver's home, however we are growing up, we all have to figure out how to pay our bills at some point in our life. We're all going to have hardship at some point in our life. So what does the research tell us in regards to that transitional period, and how do we transition people back to being able to pay their bills and deal with cortisol, deal with stress, deal with anxiety?
I'm not certain on the research on that, but I will say that I think given an opportunity to provide that pretty strict financial structure will give us the breadth of time needed to really hone in on what it looks like to have a budget, maintain a budget, significantly, getting them into a place where they're able to think about what their contribution will be if they were to be eligible for a voucher and if they were to move on to a different unit or an individual living arrangement after. But I think there is, and what we've encountered is there's just so much trauma with the feeling of housing insecurity if I don't pay my $125 a week for my program fees. What does that look like? And I can see people in their minds in this crisis cycle. I think the thing that I'm most excited about with the network that we're building is that I think there are organizations like Family Promise who do budgets real well. They're the, best in the biz, and that is one of their, core specialties. They've been working with the families that are living at 1128 Ohio. This is sometimes their first job that they've had in a while. A lot of them had to navigate. I have to I have to have a job to get childcare, but I can't get childcare without a job. And so Family Promise has been pretty instrumental in providing that budgetary support. Reentry does an amazing job as well, but I think having a real clear focus on that financial discrepancies and those fears people have around money and what it looks like to save and what it looks like to budget, the more time that we have with them in that First Step House, the more I think we can build that skill set.
And who has the data on how much time is needed for an individual or a family? Because you said more time is needed, right? You said that there's a certain amount of time that is needed. And I know that that time is going to be different for every single individual, every family, for every circumstance. So do we have any benchmarks that we can use to understand what that time is? Because that time will help us understand budgeting, understand
Absolutely.
funding, and what it is that we truly need for our programming.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that one of our program partners, and it's kind of the brother organization to Cardinal, is Artists Helping the Homeless. A huge component of the work that happens in that stage one house is assessing, paying off fines and fees, setting money aside for savings, and making a plan for the future. So we could take a deeper dive into that and how all of our program partners, whether it's Family Promise, I know it's a component of the coaching that other organizations do. But I know that that's one of the reasons why Artists Helping the Homeless is able to move folks through that stage one, because they're able to make those goals and hit those milestones with folks. And they regularly report on their outcomes reports that folks are able to purchase a car, move on to that next stage of recovery, pay off all their fines and fees, start going to school. They're meeting those milestones regularly based on the framework that we have partners executing today.
Commissioners, I want to make sure we've got a few partners at the table and a few other supplemental requests. I know that Commissioner Kelly maybe had some questions for Cardinal House, and then want to check with Commissioner Dorsey too before we move on to another partner.
Well, this is why I think maybe we need a little bit more time, because as I'm trying to understand the budget ask and the dollars that are needed, I just think maybe we need more time with each partner.
I think
But-
one other thing is I'll mention is that we typically are able to get at least 60 days of support, either through our partners with MIR, Heartland RADAC, Drug Court, Probation. They're able to supplement that a second month after the reentry bed has, and I'll say 60 days is not enough. So that's about the context I have for what's not working.
Hannah, I first want to say thank you for recognizing there's some things not in the budget. You're not the only one. I think that's something I'm going to hit on with a number of partners, is when we have gaps in the budget document, it doesn't show a braided funding approach, even if it's goal related. If you're trying to raise money for that, it helps me understand sort of what the different levels of funding might be. So thanks for doing that. That was going to be one of my questions. This is a real growth in Cardinal Housing Network's work, right? And I'm interested to hear from you, your capacity for that organization. I mean, these are a number of employees now with benefits and things like that. We don't have job descriptions there. Can you talk about what you're thinking, what's on your mind as we ask Douglas County voters to put trust in an organization that's really growing very rapidly?
Absolutely. Well, the two positions that are currently funded, you all helped through the Municipalities Fights Addiction Fund, and I'll be candid, we were going to have a tight end of year had that not come through. So I just want to extend my gratitude that we're still here and we're still operating. What we're struggling most with right now is that we have an absolutely exceptional case manager in Hattie Moore. Hattie came to us from Burt Nash. She has the skill set to build these case plans for each housing individual. Right now, Hattie spends most of her time driving individuals around. We have explored what that looks like for other organizations to provide that, and no other ones do. Mirror will provide them to and from treatment, but in terms of getting people to where they need to go, it's really important that we do that. And so these 2 additional positions, and I wanted to speak on the third one because I listed 5 in there, and I included benefits for those, but 2 of those are those live-in house manager positions, and they would be, in my mind, very different from kind of a peer role that we had previously used to approach this, where we find somebody who had potentially lived in Oxford for a while and had some skill sets there. We want this to be a very integrated role. We want this to be their full-time job, and be able to take our women to events on the weekends and meetings in the evenings. And one of our biggest gaps is that community connection. That skills, those, independent living skills, all of those kinds of things. We're not able to tackle those right now because so much of our operation is logistics. So having those 2 individuals that are in those homes, I really don't believe that we need a live-in house manager at this point in time at 1126 and 1128 Ohio. But we could have somebody that's at 1046, pay them a bit more to be able to do coverage, at least for both. The last position, which would then obviously reduce some of those requirements for us to pay benefits, is I'd really like to utilize that dollar amount to expand expertise in potentially accounting, property management. I'd love to see somebody who could potentially come in and do some administrative work over the volunteer base, or be able to help with some of those managerial tasks that would alleviate some of the work that I'm doing, to be doing more of the fundraising and to be doing more of the community connection. Right now, we are just in the weeds with it. And so I really did base my request very candidly in correlation to what Artists Helping the Homeless is. But as I've given it a lot more thought, I think that being able to maybe do some independent contracting work and not having 5 full-time staff and utilizing that other bucket of money to be able to expand our expertise would really free up what we're able to do. But the thing is we really do. We have such amazing community partners that we don't have to do all those things, but we have to get them to where they're going. And that's truly not the best use of Hattie's skill set. So.
Thanks. And just my last question, talk about the decision to say, I mean, we have great partners here at the table who are doing a lot of work. Why did you choose to do this as independently rather than partnering with another organization? I mean, you spoke earlier about Family Promise and the great work they do. Why is it important for Cardinal to stand on its own, separate, instead of working with another partner? Why was that important?
Well, most of these organizations, given so much of the program description, and I will send you the job descriptions and kind of what I'm thinking about for that final job there, being broken up into maybe opportunities. But regardless, I think that we are the connecting piece in so many ways. I was going through our data, and 21 of 23 of our women that we've admitted so far into 1046 have a co-occurring SBMI. And we have to get them to their appointments at Burt Nash. We have to get them to their appointments at Heartland, or there is crisis. We have talked to a multitude of other agencies. I thought that the one that we maybe would be able to work with would be RADAC in terms of using peers where they already have a support system. I mean, I am not opposed to, utilizing Alive Inc. to be able to provide that transportation, but I can't rely on a service that may or may not be used by, like, we couldn't use it in its fullest capacity. We really need to be able to utilize our own transportation to get these women where we're going. Now, if Family Promise comes online and we can build this peer transportation model, and we're using that time to transport people as kind of a therapeutic peer one-on-one stuff, then, we could bring them into our transportation. There's all of these factors I think that are promising where we could utilize peers, but I've really kind of transitioned this from being a true transportation partner to be a core member of our team that's doing that property management, that crisis care management. And that's kind of a shift from when I originally submitted that. So just want to be candid about that.
What percentage of your people come directly out of jail?
I would say the majority of them. We, in 2025, our data, we've got some data analysis that I think is really promising, but again, it's such a small cohort and we were really building into that I just wanted to be transparent that there's not a lot there, but we received about 34 referrals from different agencies, and we took, I believe 18 or 19 of those directly from jail and or probation, parole. But the way that the reason why we do that is because if this person has been booked into jail, they're then eligible for Douglas County Reentry Case Management Services. They don't have to be booked in at that time, but to be able to utilize the 1 month of free rent and to be able to use their case management for the sheriff's office to be a good steward of dollars, it needs to be somebody who has been participating in some capacity in the justice system.
Possibly by the end of this week, we'll have a draft of when we provided you all with the analysis of the crisis system impact analysis of the flexible housing pool. We have an early version of of what it looks like, an analysis from our IT department, from Ani, on what it looks like, what's the impact of Cardinal Housing on that same population. So just looking at the number of women, well, overall, the early draft of it shows that crisis contacts before service was 66 among a cohort of 23 individuals that have been served over time, 66 crisis contacts before housing, and 42 after. And that's just looking at emergency department and jail stays. So we hope to have more data included in that just to give you a similar picture of what kind of impact providing the housing and the wraparound services look like for this population, which, as Hannah said, is more often than not women that are immediately releasing from Douglas County Jail, which is not a lot of organizations are focusing on that population, and that is an area that Hannah stepped into.
Other questions for Cardinal Housing Network? Sorry, let me be accurate. Okay, well, we also have a couple of supplemental requests from Family Promise for consideration for one-time dollars. So I want to check in with commissioners, see if we have any questions about those.
I do have a couple. I'm going to start with some budget questions. The narrative mentions some rental income that you get from vouchers, et cetera, which then goes back into programs, but I'm not sure where it's captured in the revenue on your budget.
That's a good question, Commissioner. Thank you for asking that. It comes in this budget. It would show up in contributions. And it's not, I didn't break that down, so I apologize for that oversight.
And it looks like there's 6 new apartments are coming online here pretty soon. Are you?
September. I think
All right.
we think.
And that's with the 9th Street Missionary Baptist.
Correct.
There's mentioned that there'll be rent paid to them, but that maybe hasn't come online yet.
Right. We won't start paying rent to 9th Street until we start using the apartments.
Thanks.
So it jumped out to me that your one-time request is for safe temporary family shelter, and you have no funding from the city of Lawrence. Can you talk to me about, that was sort of, as we did a place for everyone, shelter in my mind was sort of where the city was focusing and we were on supportive housing. Can you talk about what's going on there?
It wasn't brought to us as an opportunity. When I talked with Jill about this opportunity with the county, she mentioned that it might be a possibility.
Okay.
So it would just didn't come on our radar as an opportunity from the city.
Thanks.
I also think that, what you define in the Family Promise model as emergency shelter is not what the Lawrence Community Shelter is, and is not what we set out to accomplish as a goal in a place for everyone. Family Promise emergency shelter looks different, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it is different. And I do think that, it's more aligned with supportive housing in many ways because you layer on all those supportive services that are there. So the thinking, Family Promise has always been in my mind. If I go back to Brenda's predecessor, Dana Ortiz, she felt very strongly that, you know, true emergency shelter is not where families need to be. It looks like they define it at Family Promise as an emergency, but the way I think I've come to appreciate it, and I think some of our partners have, is it looks closer to, on the continuum of services, it looks a lot closer to supportive housing. So that's how we've approached it as part of this project. And that's why you see Family Promise sitting at the table with the different supportive housing partners, rather than later this week with the Lawrence Community Shelter.
We have our lanes with a place for everyone. And so I'm just kind of curious as to why you guided Family Promise in this particular direction and did not bring the city of Lawrence to the table for this budget request.
I didn't guide anyone. I just as I described, I consider Family Promise a supportive housing partner. The work that I've always done on this project and this work is always considered Family Promise to be a supportive housing partner.
Place for Everyone is a very collaborative plan, is it not? With the city of Lawrence, I'm just kind of curious why we would not bring the city of Lawrence to the table as a partner and suggest that Family Promise would go in that direction.
The city of Lawrence has had a project off and on for the last several years to build and we were going to help fund some of the capital to operate a family shelter. They've not had the budget room to proceed or to move forward on that. And that would be more emergency shelter. As we've said, even though this is called a shelter, it's more of a transitional supportive housing environment. But so the true family shelter the city has looked at that project and we've talked about it off and on over the years. They just haven't come up with the money to fund it.
And Family Promise has actually agreed to try to revisit the goal area of a place for everyone around having a true family emergency shelter. Not that Family Promise is wanting to operate it, but they still see the need along with several other partners for that. City of Lawrence is going to be attending that upcoming meeting. We continue to talk with the City of Lawrence on all of our Place for Everyone projects. We have regular monthly steering committee meetings.
Thank you.
If no one has another question for Family Promise, I have a quick one. It said that you would save $28,000 if you're annually. Would that come off from your annual request from Douglas County for the $50,000 that we do? I mean,
Yeah,
if you're able to apply that,
Potentially could,
it
yes.
potentially could.
It would save us enough money for us to be able to do that. And I want to make a correction to Commissioner Willie's question. I misspoke when I said that it comes in as rent comes in as contributions. It actually offsets program expenses. So it just gets subtracted from our Yeah. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Family Promise, commissioners? I think, Jill, if I'm correct, that covers all the supplemental requests we have in this particular area, but we do have other partners here, Tenants to Homeowners, the Housing Authority, Mental Health. Look at me, I'm just going to get it wrong. I'm sorry. Mental Health America. And we also have folks from Artists Helping the Homeless here. So I just want to check in and see if we have any questions about, there's no supplemental requests, but about their budget requests otherwise.
And I sounded like commissioners may have still had some questions for Cardinal that we didn't get to.
Thank you.
I have a quick one for Tenants to Homeowners. See if you get a mic there. So much of the housing that you're providing or a portion of the housing, a portion of your mission is around supportive housing. Also, I'm curious about the debt that you carry on those projects and where's that reflected?
The supportive service units that we have built do not have any debt. So that is one of the reasons we can manage those with a lot of extra time that it absolutely takes from the rental property manager without increasing rent. the rent is at a fair amount, but that's supporting a lot of the supportive services and extra time for the rental team. For example, we have a tenant right now. We've received 371 texts in the last 2 weeks. A lot of those have been removing lights and things that we do have to address. We can't just ignore. And so there are, again, supportive service housing is with some of the hardest to house, and we're willing to do that. But the timing, the requirements that takes to fund and do are significant.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mental Health America, the Heartland. So in reading your budget requests, and thanks for filling out all of the government contracts and all of that, I'm trying to get a picture. You're not just in Douglas County, you're in other places. And I'm trying to get a picture of the services that you provide in Douglas County and how much of this 519,000 goes to that versus goes to services all over the area. Is there a way you can help me understand that?
Maybe. I mean, I can say directly that all of the money that we get from you all gets spent in Douglas County, except for a small percentage for administration overhead. I don't know how to answer the question beyond
And
that.
their service agreement too. We have that individual,
Okay.
that broken out
Oh, great.
in,
Okay.
in their service agreement. I can provide that as a follow-up.
Okay. And then that's interesting to me because I've heard you in here and in other spaces talk about how you're ramping up services in Douglas County, and yet the budget request is the same last year as it is this year. So I'm trying to understand how, if you're ramping up and hiring folks.
So Mental Health America, they took on this program at the very end of last year. That budget, that operating budget for the flex pool, most of that was with Bert Nash last year. So they don't have the same budget. They have this, when they really have been ramping up. So they started, I think you were fully staffed.
February 1st.
February, yeah. So the operating budget was with another organization last year.
Jill, you're saying the 519, 552 that we have here in our budget, it's actually less than that because of some of that money went to another organization earlier? Last year?
Last year,
Okay.
yeah. The operating expenses for 2025 for the flexible housing pool, a majority of it, if not all of it, went to Bert Nash Community Mental Health Center. And then we made the transition.
So when I talk about ramping up, that really means recruiting new landlords,
Yeah.
bringing new tenants in, signing new leases, transferring leases from Bert Nash to us. That's really what I mean by ramping up.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
And this may be a little bit of general comment, but it kind of relates to what Commissioner Kelly was talking about. And you'll hear me talk about this with some other partners that will come up at the next round. But these bigger organizations that serve a geographic area, it's really nice for us to understand like what talent are we pulling in? We're pulling in a talent that is offered statewide or regionally, and what do those dollars look like so that we can kind of figure out how we fit in the mix. And I think that's really helpful because when we just see the Douglas County portion, and you're not the only partner to do it that way, it's harder for us to know, like, are we funding your whole operation? Because it looks like that, and we know that's not the case. So it just helps us know kind of where the Douglas County work fits in with your larger goals. It's more of a comment than a question.
I think when I provide the surface agreement, the personnel budget, you see the county is paying for the full-time staff, which I think is 3 FTE, correct, Simon? And then a little bit of Simon's time.
Yep.
And a little bit of Sue's time, which given the amount of time that Sue and Simon are spending on this project right now feels like a bargain, but we can provide you with the details on that.
I appreciate that.
Commissioners, other questions for any partners at the table?
In Q4 of 2025, I think it was November maybe, we approved approximately $167,000 for Mental Health of America. And I believe it was that contingency funding. So why are we not seeing it in the 2025 actuals? Because then in January, we came back and then there was that expanded scope that was approved. Because I was a no. And so that's why the numbers are just not meshing for me. So I'm just kind of curious.
So I would go back to I can pull those are the AIRs for those two meetings. I think a couple things happened. We made the transition at the end of 2025 of service providers, where we onboarded Mental Health America, and provided, a small amount of money for basically December of 2025 for them to get up and going, and pick up, after Burton Ash. And then, another thing happened is that we, got more information about the federal funding that was available to offset this program. And then the other thing that happened is with the changeover of, we combined what was once the HUD funded permanent supportive housing program into the flexible housing pool program. Initially, our conversation with Mental Health America was, can you all manage the flexible housing program? And then we came to the conclusion that, nope, we're going to actually ask Mental Health America to manage the flexible housing pool program and the HUD-funded permanent supportive housing units. And at that time, we said, these are the same programs, so we're going to make one. That was where what was 12 units of permanent supportive housing and 22 units of flex units. We mushed them all together into one combined flexible housing pool program.
So they're paid in two places, Jill.
Yes.
Yeah, they're paid in two places.
And that's the HUD grant that we just received, like, I don't know, like
And
4
that-
weeks ago approximately.
Yeah, and
that we
that's
just
for
approved.
administration
Mm-hmm.
under the housing, that should be showing it was paid out of, under administration on the Housing and Human Services budget.
And so that's why we would not see it under MHAH's budget. Is that
Yes.
why we see that discrepancy?
Their spreadsheet might be wrong, but I think we paid it out of, yeah. We can look into it.
I know that we constructed that budget as if it was one pot of money. If that was the incorrect thing to do, we can go back and revise it.
Bake says it's in the behavioral health budget.
Okay, because yeah, it's just only showing that Douglas County in 2025, it's $23,000. I mean, is that?
I think their spreadsheet's not showing that correctly.
Okay.
You have to
Yep,
be on
no,
mic.
totally
You have to go.
Yep.
Yeah, it's okay.
We'll just get it clarified later.
Okay,
I want to make sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to
Staff
make
have
sure
the
that the
correct
dollars are correct. So,
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure staff have what they need to get us correct information to answer your question, Commissioner Anderson.
yeah, I just want to make sure we have the correct numbers that we've already currently paid out and that we know what the current ask is. We know what we're currently funding. We know what's currently in the budget. So we know what we're doing.
Yeah, it's on page 171 of your budget request report for the Behavioral Health Fund. You'll see part of it there. And then the other part is under administration. I'll get you that page number.
A question, maybe starts with Jill, in terms of master leases. So we've got 12 master leases held with Mental Health America of the Heartland. I said it right. And then do we have other master leases that we are also covering? I think it's a phenomenal tool. I just am curious what percentage this is.
I think most, if not all, of the master lease funding or the contracts are managed in Mental Health America. They used to be, some of them, I think, were the Housing Authority managed them, but go ahead, Simon.
I'll do my best here. Yeah, so there are 12 master leases that we control. The other 20 or so units or households are all money that Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority manages. Those leases are in the tenants' names. The master leases are in our names. And as far as the flex program goes, that's it. We've got the budget for 12 units. I don't know if other providers in the community are doing something similar or not.
The master leases are a helpful tool just for the folks that are going to have the most complex needs. Yeah, and there's an extra layer of management for the units that Mental Health America is able to do.
And the other folks that you're providing services for, are they all with Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority?
Yep. Yep.
Any other questions for our supportive housing partners, commissioners or staff?
So since we have just a little bit of time, I'm interested and I see Artists Helping the Homeless is here and Hannah is doing the work on the female side. I've heard multiple years that we have a hard time getting any sort of braided funding in this space. Artists Helping the Homeless, if you guys want to come up, you're 56%, Douglas County is 56% of the budget for your organization, according to your documents. I'm interested, since we have just a little bit of time, of understanding how do we get more funding into that stream. Usually when an organization is at 50% Douglas County, that's a red flag for me because it's starting to look like a county organization. I'm just interested in hearing you all talk about that a little bit.
This has definitely been part of the work that we've been trying to build with this network model. There are a lot of organizations that have a tremendous amount of leverage on other funding. Like when I noted MIR earlier, they have barrier reduction funds that'll help supplement rent. We've got the reentry team that oftentimes covers meds up to 90 days, if not longer. A lot of those MAT injections are pretty expensive. MIR also provides some support with that, DECA as well. They all have those funds that we can leverage. So when I'm thinking about, this core component of it, again, it's not including the food, it's not including, all the additional services that I do think are absolutely attainable through fundraising, through grant writing, all of those kinds of things. I think there is a huge gap that we have in finding ways to be able to bill for services too. We are not, like, we explored too what it looked like to become a Medicaid provider and to be able to provide that transportation. The amount of government documentation required for that, it doesn't really feel like it's a viable option. But like I mentioned before, so many of the women in our organization have co-occurring SBMI diagnosis. And so I do think there's opportunities. I don't think Cardinal, because we don't provide treatment, and in the ASAM guidelines, like housing is the bottom. Like the value of it that has been placed on it from ASAM is pretty low in the spectrum. So I don't know that we'll ever be able to be eligible for block funding, for state funding. So finding ways where we're utilizing resources from Bert Nash, or because they hold a good chunk of that money, to be able to get folks to where they need to go, to be more engaged in services. Bert Nash does a ton for us for stabilization in the jail. When folks come to us, they typically have their medications sorted. They have either been to inpatient treatment or been seen by a psychiatrist at Osawatomie. They are doing a lot of the pre-work. I think that one of the biggest ways that we're going to be able to expand on this is to focus on grant opportunities for minority women, but also justice involved. I think there's money to be had in this reentry world, in this drug court rehabilitation, kind of the comprehensive thing. So I think that's where we're going to focus. I don't think that either one of us are ever going to be eligible for substantial state and federal dollars unless we are collaborating with a good chunk of individuals where we can put in a request for Douglas County, like you had mentioned, through the public health department, or finding ways where we can leverage all these things. But the more money that these other agencies are getting and being able to provide services for our folks, it takes off of our operating budget. We oftentimes do step in and buy, shoes for someone to go to their brand new job or something like that. But, we utilize Ballard, we utilize Social Service League. We have an amazing partnership where we just had a woman who had been with us for almost a year and just moved into her own unit, first time in 27 years, and was in drug court. And she just was able to obtain all of these collective services. And so I think these like true rehabilitation programs like drug court, behavioral health court, veterans court, family court, if we ever get to conversations regarding that, I think that's where our leverage is going to be for dollars. Again, Cardinal is so new and we just don't have the financial history to be a competitive candidate. And again, housing is at the bottom of the funding in terms of behavioral health and SPMI funding and stuff.
Yeah, so I think kind of like Hannah mentioned, the one thing that I started talking about with Jill a little bit is going over our specialty court numbers, behavioral health court and drug court. I think it's tough to go to a drug court graduation without seeing someone that's been involved with Artists Helping the Homeless. So I think there's money possibility there. We've just never explored it yet. So we're kind of in the infant stages of doing that. It's also, with peer-led housing stabilization, kind of like we do, we don't have clinical services, and a lot of money wants to go to clinical services, and it's very hard in the peer sector to monetize what a peer does, and that's just kind of what we've seen is if you can provide this service, there's money for that, but that's not what a peer does. That's more for the clinical side of it, so that's why we do collaborate with all the different partners in town. Also, just on my end, I've made it a concerted effort. We're looking at joining like this BNI networking group. There's a nonprofit seat that's free for us. That is just an opportunity to go and build and network what we're doing and ways we're able to establish some sort of other funding. So yeah, I think that, yeah.
I got a question for you. What percentage of your folks come directly out of jail?
I'd say on average about 65%. Those are good, come directly from jail. The rest are from mere, what's the other treatment center? Avalon, and we occasionally will take someone directly off the streets, but it's usually between 65 and 70%. And just real quick on that, and that's the other thing I was going to mention is that, so anytime we try to look at some sort of HUD funding, we don't actually serve homeless people to HUD funding, because once they've established time in the jail, I think it's over 60 days, the jail becomes their address, and their requirement for us would be that we would allow them to go to one night of homelessness and then accept them in before they would qualify for that kind of funding. So that's one of the things. It's just a really weird space we fall in. Am I? Oh yeah. It's a real weird space we fall into because, is it working? Okay. That we technically don't serve homeless people according to HUD because we won't allow them to be homeless. We pick them up directly from the jail, because if you allow them to stay at LCS or somewhere for a day when they release, they're not going to make it to us. So
I would just reiterate that there is a real benefit of having a direct transportation line from where they're being released from to the property. It's a lot harder to get people in for interviews, for intake, to come in clean if they have that gap period. And I think that that's why that transportation stuff is so important, because it all breaks down. All the work that was done prior breaks down if there is not a safe place and a safe way to get there when we're making these decisions.
Any other questions for these partners, commissioners?
Well, I don't want anyone to feel left out, so I'll have a question for the Housing Authority. And it's just pretty basic. And you put in for the same funding for the voucher program, the local voucher program that we have. Any changes that you see coming with that, or is that kind of functioning within the gap as need be?
Yeah, the need is greater than what we're asking for. And I think that's just the capacity that the Housing Authority has to operate that program at, just because we have to absorb that population into our general voucher program. So we don't see a change anytime soon.
And as folks are using these local vouchers that are funded by the county, are they mostly going to Housing Authority properties, or they are also being housed with some of the other partners we have here?
They're all private, with private landlords, including Cardinal. The city funding that we receive has to be utilized within the city. When we receive county funds, we're able to extend that housing options to the greater Douglas County area. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I had two questions. Artists Helping the Homeless, your total population that you can handle at once? Is it 13 or 14?
So at our respite housing, we can hold 8. And then at our second step housing, we can hold 5 and a live-in staff member.
So 13.
13 total, but yeah.
And Hannah, what is your total population you can hold?
Right now for staff capacity, we've limited 1046 to 6 individuals, and then we have 8 children and 3 adults over at 1128. And then potentially, 4 more families and some more in Baldwin.
Thanks.
So I can't do math.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, well, thank you all for being our first partners at the table to kick off budget hearings. We hope you have a good rest of your day and week. And with that, I will invite, as the shuffle happens, well, let me check with commissioners. Does anybody need a break? Okay. How about, we'll take a 5-minute break just to reset the table and let our partners get up here. And if anybody needs a break, otherwise we'll come back at 10:35.